Hello, everybody. It's Miss Peachy again from your WCA biology class. So now we are over here on Unit 3, Lesson 12, Modeling Body Systems. I wish I could move that over there a little bit. And so basically the gist of kind of what we're doing here with modeling body systems is that in biology is the general class, which is what you guys are taking. We are studying all living things. And so rather than having to try to study how these body systems are in every single type of living thing, we're kind of doing a representative sample, which is just giving us an idea. And so we are using humans because why not? We're all humans, right? To as our model for these different body systems. The alternative would be for us to try to study the different body systems in all sorts of different types of animals, or in plants and fungi and animals and humans, and it becomes kind of a lot of information. So in the previous lesson, you looked a little bit at the respiratory system, and then you watched a Khan Academy video on the nervous system. And in this lesson, you're going to be looking at the circulatory system and the digestive system, and then how the nervous system kind of influences all body systems. Because it's kind of, remember, it's your brain, it controls everything. So it does have an influence on every single type of body system that you have. So as always, I'm going to remind you that I have a notes guide for you. I've included a lot of little pictures in here as well as some boxes for you to type some notes into, because as we kind of go through the lesson, I want to make sure that you can put some information in here to help you remember kind of some of the key parts of the two body systems we're going to be looking at. And then this is the table that is found later in your lesson, as well as all of the different vocabulary words, the keywords. And I just realized that, okay, I'll have to fix that a little bit there. But all right, so I'm actually going to bring us to my whiteboard this time, because the first body system that is discussed is actually I do have these out of order, but that doesn't matter. The first one we're going to look at is the digestive system. And let me just bring this over here. Okay. So our digestive system is made up of a bunch of different types of organs. We have our primary organs and our accessory organs to the digestive system. We have two different processes in which digestion can occur. We have something called mechanical digestion, and then we have something called chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion would just be to break something apart into smaller pieces so it's easier to be able to fully chemically digest. So chewing, for example, is a type of mechanical digestion. Your teeth are physically breaking down the food that you eat into smaller pieces. Your stomach also participates in mechanical digestion just through the muscle contractions and stuff in your stomach that help to kind of mix up and break up the food that you're eating. Much of the digestion we do, though, is chemical digestion. And chemical digestion is done through the aid of something called enzymes. You recall, enzymes are a type of protein. You manufactured those proteins during the process of protein synthesis, transcription, and translation, right? And these proteins are special because they perform a job. They actually have a different, they're not just like a physical type of a protein, like muscles or things like that. They actually perform a task. So these types of enzymes will chemically break down the food that we eat. There's one kind of enzyme you find in your mouth and in your small intestines that's known as amylase. Oops, I think that's too skinny. So amylase is a digestive enzyme that breaks down starch. It takes starch, which is like a complex carbohydrate, and breaks it down into sugar. Okay, it can break down that starch into simpler sugars, so that's easier for your body to absorb those simple sugars. Another type of enzyme that we have is an enzyme called peptase. Peptase will break down proteins into amino acids. As you recall, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Ah, man, kind of messy at the bottom of my screen there. So that's just two of the digestive enzymes that we have as part of our chemical digestion process in the digestive system. So when you chew, start mechanically digesting, your saliva contains amylase. It starts the chemical digestion process right in your mouth. You also have salivary glands all over in your mouth and in your jaw that produce saliva, which contains amylase, as well as it contains buffers that help to kind of buffer any kind of acidic foods that you've eaten, so it doesn't destroy your teeth. And there's some antibacterial components in there, so your immune system plays a role in your mouth as well. And then the saliva contains mucin, which is basically mucus that helps you swallow the food, helps lubricate it so you can swallow it down. Then it travels down your esophagus to your stomach. And what happens is this process occurs within the esophagus where your muscles in your esophagus are going to contract. And they do this kind of in a wave type motion. They squeeze, kind of progressively going further and further down. I always like to think of it like I'm trying to get the last bit of toothpaste out of the tube of toothpaste. And so what I'm going to do is I have my phone here, but I'm just going to start at the top and I'm just going to squeeze and kind of squeeze it until I can get it all the way out. And that's kind of what this muscle contraction is like. Those muscle contractions are known as peristalsis. Okay, so peristalsis, and I'm going to go ahead and, oops, move my screen just a little bit so that I can actually fit this information on here. I'm going to call this smooth muscle because this is a special kind of muscle called smooth muscle. That moves the food. At this point, we call this a bolus of food. It travels down your esophagus and into your stomach. And in your stomach, the process of both mechanical and chemical digestion continues here. You have, again, enzymes that are released. Peptase is released in your stomach that helps to digest protein. You have a lot of stomach acid, and stomach acid does help with the digestive process as well, but its primary purpose is actually to lower the pH enough in your stomach so that it kills a lot of bacteria. So if you consume a lot of bacteria, then it will die in that stomach acid, and it keeps that from actually making its way into your intestines, which is how it would be absorbed into your bloodstream, and you might get quite sick from that. So in the stomach, it continues to digest. It can sit here for quite a long time, and it makes its way through the stomach, and then it enters into the small intestines. That's our next stop. Okay, so let's kind of write this over on the side here. So we have mouth to esophagus, long word. This is where I'm actually going to type these just to make this a little easier for all of us to read. And then it goes to the stomach, and then the small intestines, and the large intestines, And the rectum, finally the anus is the where it exits your body, right? So I'll put our little lines in there to indicate that it's moving through these different areas. So in the stomach, again, you have more chemical and mechanical digestion. In the small intestines, let's look at that one for a second. So in our small intestines, you have some help here. So you have some accessory organs that help to play a role in the small intestines. You have the pancreas. So what the pancreas, that is correct. It looks weird. Pancreas, what it does is it plays a role in the digestive system. It also plays a role in the endocrine system as well. So it has some multiple roles to it. So we don't call it a primary digestive system organ. It's called a secondary accessory digestive system organ because its primary role isn't in the digestive system, but it plays a role. So it releases some digestive enzymes. Quite a few of them, actually. So it continues the process of chemical digestion, and then it also is going to release something called bicarbonate. So what bicarbonate is, this is going to neutralize all the food that comes from your stomach. So as it leaves your stomach, it's very acidic because it's been sitting in stomach acid. So it needs to be neutralized. Your stomach has been adapted to be able to handle all that acid, but your small intestines isn't. So bicarbonate neutralizes stomach acid. Okay, and then later, as it moves through the small intestines, different parts of the small intestines, as it gets kind of towards the end of it, then all that digested food starts to, all whatever you can absorb is absorbed into your bloodstream. So all the sugars and the different energy, fats and things like that that are digestible are absorbed back into your bloodstream so that you can have the energy to survive. So the small intestines does both digestion earlier, kind of in the upper part of it, and towards the lower part of the small intestines, it's doing absorption. It's absorbing lots of nutrients here. Okay. So then, as it makes its way past the small intestines to the large intestines, oh, by the way, I forgot an accessory organ. Another accessory organ within the small intestines is something called the liver. So you may have heard of the liver before. Oops. Some people like to eat liver, but not human liver, obviously. But um, people sometimes like to eat cow liver, calf liver, I think, and goose liver and stuff. I don't mind goose liver. I'm not a big fan of beef liver at all. So the liver, what it does is it releases bile. And the bile is then stored in the gallbladder. The purpose of bile is to break down fats. So it breaks down so that they are more digestible. So it's another part of chemical digestion, right? So we have amylase, which is breaking down starch. Amylase is produced in your mouth. It's also produced by the small intestine, or in this, it's released by the pancreas in the small intestines. The pancreas is producing other digestive enzymes. Pepsin is produced both in the stomach and elsewhere as well to break down proteins, and the liver releases bile, which temporarily gets stored in the gallbladder and then is released as you eat foods that have fat in them to be able to break down the fat. So once all the food is chemically digested and starts to get absorbed in your bloodstream, so you have all this energy, then what's left over makes its way into the large intestines. And here in the large intestines, what we see is we see the reabsorption of water. At this point, the mixture that you have running through your digestive system is pretty liquidy. We call this stuff chyme. And when it gets into the large intestines, that water gets reabsorbed back into your body. You need that water so you don't get dehydrated, right? So about 90% of all the water that's found within the chyme at that point gets reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. And then what's left makes its way into the rectum, where it's stored temporarily until you go to the bathroom, and then it comes out the anus. So that's kind of the run of things of the digestive system. All right. So then the other body system that is discussed here in this unit, or in this lesson here, is the respiratory system. And again, remember, this is a model system that's being used to kind of model a bunch of different kinds of respiratory systems and all different kinds of organisms. In humans, we have what's known as a double loop respiratory system. I think it becomes pretty obvious here. We've got two loops. We have the pulmonary loop and we have the systemic loop, or the system loop. So from the heart, you have one loop that will make its way from the heart to the lungs to be where gas exchange takes place. So gas exchange is where blood that's coming from the body is very high in carbon dioxide and very low in oxygen. So let me zoom in a little bit here. So this blood right here has a high amount of CO2. So carbon dioxide is a waste product from cellular respiration, which we'll learn about coming up here in the next unit. And oxygen we need to be able to do cellular respiration, so it's important to have. And so you got to make sure you get rid of the CO2 and you get more oxygen in. So this is coming from the body here. Actually, I don't want to write sideways. So the system loop comes from the body, makes its way to the heart, and then that it moves into the pulmonary loop, and then from here the pulmonary means lungs. So this is going to the lungs. In the lungs, you have gas exchange. You've got carbon dioxide moving out, oxygen moving in. So then as it moves from the lungs again, now it's high in oxygen and low in CO2. Okay. And then it makes its way back to the heart, where it is then pumped back through the system loop to the rest of the body to be able to oxygenate all of the cells in the human body. So that's our double loop circulatory system. In the lungs itself, you have something called gas exchange that takes place. So what's interesting is this is where we kind of get that concept of diffusion coming back, right? We talked about diffusion and how diffusion is how stuff moves from an area of high concentration to low concentration across a semi-permeable membrane. In the lungs, you've got these little things called alveoli. You actually have these little bronchioles, and they have these little air sacs at the end of them that are called alveoli. And these are connected to larger tubes which in turn get connected to, like branches from a tree, eventually get back to the entire respiratory system in the trachea. Here, let me see if I can. My picture isn't great, so I want to bring a picture in here. Okay. Okay, I think this is better. There we go. Oops. You kind of see this here, right? So there's our mouth and our nose, and that comes back into the pharynx, which is right here, and then back down to the trachea, which branches off into these bronchi, which eventually become smaller branches called bronchioles, and then the bronchioles connect to these little air sacs here, which are called alveoli. And the air sacs are surrounded by blood vessels, tiny little blood vessels called capillaries, and they're so thin. So when you look at a alveoli and a capillary that surrounds it, they actually share a membrane. Okay. And I guess I'll draw blue just to kind of further the picture here. So inside of the alveoli, okay, inside here, if you breathe in, right, you have a lot of oxygen inside and a small amount of carbon dioxide. As the blood vessel comes from your heart, you have a large amount of carbon dioxide and just a little bit of oxygen left over. Oops, that's not what I want. That's so big. That's too big. Okay. So because of diffusion, the carbon dioxide moves across the semipermeable membrane into the alveoli, and the oxygen is going to move the other way, right? Oxygen is going to move to an area where there's less oxygen because that's diffusion, and carbon dioxide is going to move to an area where there's less carbon dioxide, from an area of high concentration to low concentration. So then as the blood continues to kind of flow through here, oops, that's really big. Okay. It'll continue to flow through this loop. It then becomes more oxygenated and less carbon dioxide. This part here will leave back to the heart. Okay, going back to the heart. So that kind of gives you an idea of how that happens really at the smaller level there through the alveoli. All right, so looking at the heart itself, you've got different chambers of the heart, right? You've got 4 chambers of the heart. Look at that. This is where that cool little heart shape comes from, kind of. Actually, the whole heart kind of is a heart shape if you want to kind of know where the shape of the heart comes from. But you've got what are called atria and ventricles. The atria are the smaller ones, and it's on here, but it's a little bit blurry, so I'll rewrite it. So these are our atria. What's weird is that this is the right side of the heart, and this is the left side. And that might be weird to you because it's literally like the reverse of what it actually is on the screen. But you have to imagine that if there's a person here, if there was a person that this heart was in, that this would be that person's body, right? Not a very, not the best location, but this is that person's body here. And the person is lying on the table, right? Here's their eyes. And this is their right hand over here. So if you're lying down, that's the right side of your body. And this is the left side of your body. So when we look at somebody's heart, we have to think about when you're looking down at them, they're kind of the mirror image. So you have to make sure you realize that that's the right side of your body is the right atria and right ventricle. Left side of your body is the left atria and left ventricle. Okay, so that's why it looks kind of funky, and you might be thinking, "Didn't you know your left and right, Miss Peachy?" The short answer to that is not usually. Sometimes the left and right do kind of mix me up, but in this particular situation, this is the reason why it's right and left. So the oxygen poor blood from the body comes into the right atria here. This is kind of like the staging area. And then it makes its way from here to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it's pumped into the lungs. It is oxygenated through diffusion, through gas exchange, comes back from the lungs into the left atria to the left ventricle, and then is pumped out of the body. Okay, so those are just kind of those chambers of the heart. Yeah, all right. So we can kind of see that in this picture here, right? Right atria, right ventricle, back to the lungs. Then we go left atria, left ventricle, back to the body. Right? And that's, again, part of this double loop circulatory system because we have that pulmonary loop and that system loop. All right, so then going back to your lesson here, kind of gets us through the first couple of pages here on the different parts of the body systems. As you move all the way through here, you're going to see this chart. And this chart basically tells you how the nervous system is influencing the multiple body systems of your body. So, for example, you have our skeletal system, and the nervous system actually bones provide calcium needed for nervous system signal transmission. So, one of the things that is really necessary in order to be able to transmit your nervous impulses is calcium. It's an ion that is needed. So your bones actually provide that. The skull protects the brain. The vertebrae protect the spinal cord from injury. So the central nervous system is largely protected by a lot of very strong bones. Brain controls muscle contractions. There's in the all of your muscles contract because of, again, these nervous system electrical impulses. If you've ever used, and you might not have in your stage in life, but there are these little things called TENS machines, which are basically little patches that you put on you, and they're connected to electrodes, and it's connected to a little power pack, and it helps to kind of when you have like an injury, oftentimes it provides like a little electrical shock to that area to try to stimulate the muscles. It causes your muscles to just contract. It's kind of a cool thing. So again, all the different ways in which the nervous system is impacting those particular body systems. So it's important to realize that body systems, while we sometimes study them in isolation, they're all interconnected in lots of different ways. And one way is through the nervous system. So go ahead and go through this chart here and just kind of read through like all the different ways in which the nervous system plays an impact on these different body systems. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of this lesson here today. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next.